Hello and welcome to Weekly News Highlights. Let's start with the top stories that made headlines in the third week of October. The Ejae administration's first National Assembly audit kicked off on Monday, launching 3 weeks of government-wide accountability checks. Lawmakers are scrutinizing everything from judicial rulings to economic and cultural policies, closely questioning top officials on their decisions and performance. The Lee administration has unveiled a closely watched new package of measures aimed at cooling the overheated housing market in the capital region. This marks the president's third set of housing measures since taking office just 4 months ago. Despite uncertainties in the global trade environment, South Korea's ICT sector has hit record highs, driven by strong demand for semiconductors. Analysts say rising memory chip prices for AI servers played a key role, with the sector expected to remain strong in the coming months as well. This week, the Ejae administration's first National Assembly audit kicked off with high partisan tension, setting the tone for the 3-week reviewing process. For more, we have our political correspondent Moon Hae-ryun joining us in the studio today. Welcome, Hae-ryun.
It's good to be here, Sujin.
So, Hae-ryun, the audit began on Monday. So, what are the main targets and objectives for this review?
So the National Assembly audit is essentially a major annual review of government and public institution performance, with top officials reporting and answering questions. This year's audit, the first under the Lee Jae-myung administration, has 17 committees reviewing over 800 agencies. Lawmakers are focusing on the early performance of the Lee administration, sparking partisan conflict. The ruling Democratic Party sees the audit as a chance to showcase stability and reform, while the opposition People Power Party aims to expose mismanagement and defend former Yoon administration policies. The review therefore covers issues from recent mass hacking incidents to new government reforms and policies.
All right, so that does give us some insight into why tensions have been so high this week. So could you tell us more about how the partisan divide has been shaping the audit proceedings thus far?
So there were sharp clashes between the DP and the PPP from the onset of the audit, with the DP's decision to conduct an on-site inspection of the Supreme Court being one of the fiercest flashpoints. Supreme Court Chief Justice Cho Lee-dae faced intense questioning from the ruling bloc over a ruling finding President Lee guilty of false claims during his presidential election campaign in 2022, while opposition lawmakers called the session politically motivated. Tension further rose when Supreme Court Chief Justice Cho Lee-dae appeared before the audit but refused questioning.
If judges are made to testify about their rulings simply because they presided over a certain case, it could discourage them from making judgments based on the Constitution, the law, and their conscience, and even lead to decisions swayed by outside pressures.
At the Finance Committee, the DP has defended Lee's proposed tax reforms as normalization of the fiscal system, while the PPP argues the changes, especially corporate tax hikes and property tax revisions, will weaken market confidence and stunt investment recovery.
In some ways, I think the previous administration's tax system collapsed. I believe we are now quickly restoring that broken tax structure to normal. Take a look at the indicators. What is the most fundamental principle of tax policy? It's securing stable tax revenue.
If you look at the corporate tax levels in advanced global economies, this is effectively a corporate tax increase. I don't know how much additional revenue raising it by 1% would actually generate, but I believe such a bill, one that discourages and undermines corporate spirit, needs to be reconsidered carefully.
But the audits also extended beyond partisan disputes, touching on a wide range of policy areas. At a Foreign Affairs Committee audit, Unification Minister Chung Dong-young stated that there is a possibility of a North Korea-US summit on the sidelines of the upcoming APEC leaders meeting, and reaffirmed the END initiative, exchange, normalization, and denuclearization for Seoul's stance. And during a Culture Committee audit, Culture Minister Choi Hee-young highlighted concerns over slowing growth in Korea's cultural industries, stressing the need for active investment.
So looking ahead, what can we expect in the coming weeks as the audit continues?
So the National Assembly will also be taking its audit overseas to Cambodia, following crimes against South Korean nationals, including the kidnapping and killing of a university student by a local gang. The Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee will conduct an on-site inspection next Wednesday. It aims to review the status of crimes targeting Koreans in Southeast Asia, with the DP and the PPP clashing over who is to blame for the crimes. The DP says that crimes have surged over the past 2 years, while the previous embassy and foreign ministry failed to act, while the PPP argued the ambassador post was vacant at the time, blaming the current administration. And beyond the audit, the two parties have agreed to hold a plenary session on October 26th to process 70 livelihood-related bills, including measures to prevent emergency room turnaways and support childcare centers in remote areas. The session was set for a Sunday to avoid overlapping with ongoing audits, and both parties have pledged cooperation to ensure the swift passage of these pending bills.
All right, thank you so much for your report today, Arirang. Please keep us posted.
And thank you for having me.
Kicking off the first week after the long Chuseok break, President Ejae chaired a meeting with his aides. He emphasized the need to accelerate fiscal and regulatory reforms to bolster K-culture, which he called the core of the nation's strength. Our senior presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Expanding the power of culture into new economic growth engines. That's what topped the agenda as President Ejae presided over a weekly meeting with his senior aides upon returning to work after a long Chuseok holiday.
새로운 21세기 국제사회에서는 문화가 국가의 국격, 경쟁력, 국력의 핵심이라고 생각합니다.
Noting the growing presence of K-culture on the world stage, the president called for the need to create a comprehensive set of measures that can encompass the cultural ecosystem, adding that the notion of culture goes beyond music and art to dramas, food and beauty industries, and even democracy.
문화 콘텐츠 기반 확충에 필요한 재정이나 또 세제, 규제 측면에서 혁신의 속도를 내야 되겠습니다. 그리고 연계산업과의 시너지 효과를 높일 수단을 다양하게 강구해 봐야 되겠습니다.
The focus was also on ways to strengthen the social safety net for artists, as well as measures to support fine art, called upon by President Lee. On top of that, the Lee administration has upped next year's budget for the culture sector by nearly 9% to 9.6 trillion won, worth some $6.8 billion.
The budget for culture and art has been increased by 14%, including K-content funds and global K-culture hubs. The budget for tourism was increased by 9.5%, including a tourism pass for foreign visitors.
Monday's discussions were a reflection of Lee's policy priorities on taking care of people's livelihoods in the face of a tug-of-war trade talks with the U.S., as well as intensifying global uncertainties over the fresh rivalry between the U.S. and China.
대내외 여건이 어렵긴 하지만 바람이 거실수록 또 연이 높이 나는 원리도 생각해 봐야 되겠습니다. 지금 우리가 처한 위기를 국민의 삶을 개선하는 새로운 기회로 만들 수 있도록 주권자 제1의 공복으로서 국가 역량을 단단하게 모아 나가야 되겠습니다.
Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
President Ejae, an advocate of streamlining government regulations to drive South Korea's economic growth, presided over an open debate with ministers, business leaders, and experts. This session focused on biotech, energy, and culture sectors. Our top office correspondent Song Hee-jin has the details.
From a no to a yes. President Ejae is calling for a paradigm shift in South Korea's regulatory approach, again emphasizing that cutting red tape is key to the country's economic recovery.
어떤 규제라고 하는 게 허용되는 것을 공무원들이 정하기에는 세상이 너무 복잡하고 너무 빨리 변해요. 이제는 그래서 꼭 문제되는 거 아니면은 원칙적으로 허용한다는 관점으로 모두 전환을 좀 했으면 좋겠다.
The president made the remarks on Thursday while presiding over his administration's second open debate on regulatory reform. The debate focused on easing restrictions in biotech, energy, and culture. Industry leaders pointed to South Korea's lengthy drug approval process, which takes about 420 days on average.
Speed matters in every industry, but in biotech, it's directly tied to people's lives and to patents that drive innovation and profit. We need more qualified reviewers at the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety.
In response, the ministry plans to add 300 new reviewers and speed up the process, aiming to cut approval time to under 240 days. In the energy sector, the government will streamline import procedures for recycled resources like used batteries and lower the 3% import tariffs next year. This is to secure key minerals such as lithium and rare earths, a move already pursued by major economies like the US and Japan. On the cultural front, debate explored ways to revive South Korea's struggling film industry, hit hard by the rise of streaming services.
We urgently need an emergency injection of government funds to resuscitate our film industry. Once capital starts circulating, producers will have more choice, and major films can return to theaters.
For that, a fund worth 700 billion won, or around $500 million, will be set up next year to support local productions while expanding tax credits for film companies. Aiming to shift the government's role from a regulator to a growth partner, more industry-specific discussions and deregulation measures are expected to follow once the Presidential Committee on Regulatory Reform is launched. 송유진, Arirang News.
After celebrations marking the 80th founding anniversary of the Workers' Party, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un expressed his gratitude to those who helped organize events and visited Kumsusan Palace of the Sun. Our Kim Bo-kyung walks us through what the celebrations signify.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visited the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun, the family mausoleum, to solidify internal unity. According to the regime's Korean Central News Agency on Monday, Kim visited the site on the previous day to dedicate the glory of having celebrated the 80th founding anniversary of the Workers' Party of Korea in such a grand manner. Wearing a black leather jacket, he was quoted to have said the regime's high prestige it enjoys today cannot be thought separately from the great leader and general. The visit comes after Kim watched a mass gymnasium and art performance with people who helped to organize recent celebrations, including a military parade on October 10th. While touting the celebrations as a truly splendid grand political and cultural festival, he underlined that thanks to participants playing their role perfectly, the events could show off the regime's cultural side and its mightiness. One expert says the party's founding anniversary celebrations must have been a proud moment for the regime, as high-ranking foreign dignitaries, such as Chinese Premier Li Chang, Russia's deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, and Vietnamese leader Do Lam, were present.
Not only Kim Jong-un, but also North Korea's internal elites and citizens have never before experienced such an elevated status of the regime. This is the first time they have successfully hosted such a large-scale event with foreign guests from not only China, Russia, but also ASEAN countries.
At the military parade on Friday night, the regime showcased the newly developed Hwasong-20 intercontinental ballistic missile for the first time as well, along with other new weapons.
The Hwasong-20 mainly aimed to show off solid fuel technology and multiple warhead capability, sending a clear message to the U.S. By proving it can strike the U.S. mainland, North Korea boosted both its deterrence and bargaining power.
Dubbed the most powerful nuclear strategic weapons system by KCNA, Kim, in his speech during the parade, reportedly said the regime's army should continue to grow into an invincible entity. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics' third quarter earnings exceeded market expectations by 17%. The figure is the highest in 3 years, and analysts expect the positive trend to continue. Our business correspondent Kim Do-yeon has this report.
South Korea's largest company by market cap, Samsung Electronics, has released preliminary quarterly earnings that have significantly surpassed market forecasts. The company announced on Tuesday its preliminary earnings for the third quarter of 2025, posting an operating profit of 12.1 trillion Korean won or $8.47 billion on sales of 86 trillion won or $60.23 billion. These figures represent a quarter-on-quarter increase of 158.55% for operating profit, while sales saw a jump of 15.33%. Year-on-year, the increase is 31.8% for operating profit and 8.72% for sales. The operating profit exceeded the market consensus of approximately 10 trillion won by more than 17%. The 12.1 trillion won operating profit is the company's highest since the second quarter of 2022. The 86 trillion won in sales marks a record for any quarter, and it's the first time the company's quarterly revenue has surpassed the 80 trillion won threshold. The previous record for sales was 79.1 trillion won, set in the third quarter of 2024. According to an expert, the strong performance is driven by a combination of factors, with the trend likely to continue into next year.
The improved performance is due to three things: strong sales in AI-related memory, a surge in prices for legacy products due to supply shortages, and reduced deficits in the foundry and system LSI divisions. I expect this boom to continue through the fourth quarter.
The better-than-expected performance was reflected in the company's stock price, with shares reaching a new 52-week high of 96,000 won during intraday trading on Tuesday. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And the strong performances for local semiconductors were also clearly evident in South Korea's ICT export figures last month, which turned out to be a record high. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young has the details.
Despite uncertainties in the global trade environment, South Korea saw an all-time high performance in the ICT sector last month. According to the Ministry of Science and ICT and the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Tuesday, ICT exports for the month totaled $25.43 billion, a 14% increase from the same month last year. This resulted in a trade surplus of $11.65 billion. Outbound shipments of semiconductors, one of the country's main export engines, recorded $16.62 billion in exports. This also marked an all-time high for the second consecutive month. Exports of telecommunications equipment, which rose over 38%, and displays also contributed to this upward trend, driven by strong OLED demand. The strong performance was largely credited to the semiconductor industry thanks to higher memory chip prices amid growing demands for AI servers.
It seems the significant rise in DRAM prices played a role in this upward trend. Given the continuous strength of the semiconductor market itself, we can expect continued strong performance in Q4 as well.
Despite this upward trend, due to the tariff situation, exports to the U.S. decreased, marking it as the only region to do so, while others experienced gains. Shipments to Taiwan recorded the most significant surge, primarily fueled by a substantial rise in semiconductor exports, while other major markets, including China, Vietnam, the European Union, and Japan, also saw increased exports. Meanwhile, imports totaled $13.78 billion, resulting in a positive ICT trade balance, the second highest figure on record. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
The International Monetary Fund has raised South Korea's growth outlook for the year to 0.9%, but the international body's warnings persist that escalating tariff tensions and global uncertainties could slow the recovery. Our Moon Hye-ryun has more.
The International Monetary Fund has raised its forecast for South Korea's economic growth amid pressure on Seoul to wrap up trade negotiations in Washington. In its latest economic outlook, the IMF now expects the economy to grow by 0.9% in 2025, 0.1 percentage points higher than its July projection. This is in line with forecasts from domestic institutions such as the Bank of Korea, but lower than that of the OECD's. South Korea's forecast for 2026 was maintained at 1.8%, with the country's finance ministry stating that this projection is interpreted to mean that economic growth will return to its normal trajectory next year. The IMF, however, warns that escalating tariff conflicts could hurt South Korea's export-driven sectors, particularly automobiles, and weigh on overall growth if trade tensions intensify again. Globally, the IMF raised its growth outlook to 3.2% for this year, up 0.2 percentage points from July, citing stronger than expected resilience in major economies. The U.S. economy is now projected to grow by 2% this year and 2.1% next year, while China's growth is expected to slow from 4.8% to 4.2%. The financial institution said the impact of U.S. tariff policies was smaller than initially feared, thanks to preemptive supply chain adjustments and new trade arrangements. But it cautioned that rising tensions between Washington and Beijing could once again weigh heavily on global growth.
This is more of a downside risk in a sense. This is what we have to think about what could happen if negative trade measures were implemented, if some restrictions on exports of critical materials were implemented. It illustrates the potential for the global economy to take a turn for the worse if trade tensions become more elevated.
It also pointed to the ongoing AI investment boom as a potential source of instability, warning that if the bubble bursts, it could echo the shock of the internet stock bubble bust of the early 2000s. 문혜련, Arirang News.
The Lee administration has unveiled another set of measures to stabilize the overheated housing market in the capital region. The regulations are set to put all Seoul districts in speculative zones, along with stricter mortgage rules. Our correspondent Park Junan explains more.
After introducing loan restrictions in June and a housing supply plan in September, the South Korean government on Wednesday announced the third phase of its housing stabilization measures. Starting Thursday, all 25 Seoul districts and 12 regions in Gyeonggi-do province where investment is actively concentrated will be considered zones subject to regulations. The plan has been introduced to prioritize residential stability by balancing both demand and supply.
To ensure housing stability, the government will manage the real estate market in a balanced manner, considering both supply and demand, while imposing actual residency requirements for home purchases and strengthening regulations on loans and taxation.
Those include new loan-to-value ratio rules for the 37 affected regions, which will be lowered from the current 70% to 40%, meaning homebuyers must provide at least 60% of the purchase price in cash. Also, a new mortgage limit will be implemented when borrowing money. The money a buyer could borrow can range anywhere between 200 million won to 600 million won. If someone wants to buy a house that is worth 1.5 billion won, the maximum amount of money they could leverage is 600 million won. If someone wants to buy a house that is worth 1.5 billion won, the maximum amount of money they could leverage is 600 million won. However, the mortgage limit will be capped at 400 million Korean won for homes valued at over 1.5 billion and up to 2.5 billion. Lastly, the cap will be fixed at 200 million won for those above 2.5 billion. Under the new regulation, as the value of a purchased house increases, the maximum loan amount permitted decreases, effectively lowering the loan-to-value ratio. The government plans to carefully review real estate tax reforms while stepping up measures to curb illegal transactions and speculative demand, aiming to restore order in the housing market. Park Junan, Arirang News.
The song Golden from the hit film K-pop Demon Hunters has taken the music world by storm. You can hardly walk down the street without hearing it playing in shops. It has also risen to the top of the Billboard Hot 100, a testament to how it has captured fans' attention around the globe. Our culture correspondent Park Gun-woo sat down for an exclusive interview with the voice behind the hit.
Up, 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 Ejae goes, breaking records by topping the Billboard Hot 100 for 8 straight weeks. When Golden first hit #1, she says there was one person she couldn't stop thinking about.
The first thing I thought of was 11, 12-year-old Ejae working her butt off in the studio at SM. And it was a little message to her, if it reached, like, that you did so good.
For more than 2 decades, she's faced her share of hardships, especially during her 10-plus years as a K-pop trainee. Though she failed to debut as an idol back then, she says every moment happened for a reason.
I never, ever thought I'd be a songwriter in my life. That was never in my wish list. It just kind of organically happened when, after I came out of SM, I didn't know what I was supposed to do.
She spent long hours working alone, training herself to be better at songwriting. Then came the pandemic.
When that happened, we had to stay home. So it was hard, but it was honestly, in a way, amazing. It was a great experience because that's when I actually learned how to teach myself how to record. And a lot of songwriters don't really know how to record themselves or mix.
Through lessons learned from hard times, she joined the K-pop Demon Hunters team and helped spark a global phenomenon. As excitement builds for a possible sequel, Ejae told us about her creative ideas without hesitation.
트로트, literally. That would be amazing. So we'd love to explore the 판소리 Arirang world.
And with the soundtrack's success, Golden was submitted in multiple categories for next year's Grammy Awards, boosting her chances for a win.
Winning a Grammy Award is just truly something I wish I saw a fellow Korean American woman, Asian American woman in the industry to win. It would open doors for so many people.
After all these achievements, she reflects on what her younger self might say to her today. What do you think 11-year-old Ejae would tell you, seeing you now in one of your most golden moments of your life?
Oh my God, that's another emotional question. I think she'd just be thank you.
At the same time, she admits feeling pressure as expectations on her are so high.
Be like water. And I love that saying. That's kind of the concept of whatever comes your way, even if there's a lot of pressure, just do your best. Do whatever you can and 최선을 다해.
She also offered a heartfelt message to anyone chasing their dreams.
If my story helps, please work hard, be resilient, be kind to yourself, and also be kind to others. Everyone needs a little bit of kindness.
With that mindset, Ejae says she's working on her next steps, getting better at songwriting and exploring who she is as an artist, poised to shine golden as she was born to be. 박건우, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of weekly news highlights for the third week of October. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your weekend.